They shot it with machine guns. They dropped it from a crane. They even strapped it to the roof of a building that was being demolished. And yet it kept running, not just limping along, but driving, as if the punishment it had endured was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. In a world where modern vehicles seem designed to break down the moment the warranty expires, one truck defied all expectations and became a legend on battlefields across the globe. It wasn't designed for combat. It wasn't built as a military vehicle. It was just a pickup truck, one that happened to be nearly impossible to destroy. This isn't just a story about a pickup truck. This is the story of how Japanese engineering created an accidental icon of resilience, a vehicle so indestructible it changed modern warfare and earned a nickname that strikes fear into the hearts of generals, the Toyota Hilux, or as it came to be known in conflict zones around the world, the Technical, a weapon of war that began its life as nothing more extraordinary than a humble workhorse. What you're about to learn is how a vehicle designed for farmers and construction workers became one of the most significant military innovations of the late 20th century, not through advanced technology, but through sheer, uncompromising reliability. This is how simplicity conquered complexity, and how a company's dedication to quality accidentally changed the face of modern conflict. To understand how a humble pickup truck became a military icon, we need to travel back to post-war Japan. The year is 1968, and Toyota had already been producing small trucks for decades, but they had a problem. American pickups dominated global markets with their powerful engines and rugged image. The Japanese auto industry was still fighting to overcome its early reputation for cheap, disposable vehicles, a far cry from the quality reputation they enjoy today. Toyota needed an answer, something reliable, affordable, and tough enough to compete. Their solution? The Hilux, a portmanteau of high and luxury. Though by today's standards, there was nothing luxurious about it. Toyota was betting on a philosophy that would later define their entire brand, the idea that true luxury wasn't about leather seats or chrome trim, but about engineering that wouldn't let you down when you needed it most. The first-generation Hilux was modest, a simple, no-frills workhorse with a tiny 1.5-liter engine producing a mere 70 horsepower. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't fast. It didn't turn heads or break speed records, but it had two qualities that would change history. It was incredibly cheap to buy, and it simply refused to die. When other vehicles would sputter to a halt, the Hilux would keep going day after punishing day in conditions that would break lesser machines. Toyota's engineers had unwittingly created something revolutionary while focusing on building a truck that could withstand Japan's varied terrain and the punishing work conditions of farms and construction sites. They'd inadvertently designed the perfect vehicle for another purpose entirely: war. The very features that made it ideal for a Japanese farmer, simplicity, durability, ease of repair, would later make it the preferred choice of guerrilla fighters and special forces operators alike. The evolution of the Hilux continued through the 1970s, with each generation becoming slightly more refined, slightly more capable, but never sacrificing the fundamental reliability that had become its hallmark. Toyota understood what they had created, a reputation for building vehicles that simply would not quit, and they guarded that reputation jealously, even as other automakers chased trends and flashy features. By the 1980s, the fourth-generation Hilux had evolved significantly. With its robust 2.4-liter diesel engine, four-wheel drive capabilities, and a tough ladder frame chassis, it was the perfect storm of simplicity and durability. But what really set the 80s Hilux apart wasn't just its mechanical reliability, it was its anti-fragility. This wasn't just a truck that could withstand abuse, It was a truck that almost seemed to thrive on it, becoming a legend with every dent and scratch it survived. As the decade progressed, Toyota expanded production facilities around the world, from Thailand to South Africa, each plant producing Hilux models subtly adapted to local conditions. What remained constant was the underlying philosophy: build it simple, build it strong, build it to last. It was a philosophy that would soon be tested in ways the engineers could never have imagined. What made the 1980s Hilux nearly indestructible? Let's break it down, piece by resilient piece, to understand how ordinary components came together to create something extraordinary. First, there's the engine. The 22R series engine, found in many 80s Hilux models, is often cited as one of the most reliable engines ever built. With an over-engineered cast iron block, this four-cylinder workhorse prioritized torque over horsepower, perfect for low-speed crawling through rough terrain. But the real genius was in the tolerances. The engine was designed to run even when not perfectly maintained, to survive on substandard fuel, and to keep functioning even when parts began to wear. It wasn't just good engineering, it was forgiving engineering, designed with the understanding that in the real world, ideal conditions rarely exist. Unlike modern engines with their complex electronic systems, the Hilux powertrain was mechanical simplicity at its finest. No computerized engine management, no electronic throttle control, just basic mechanical fuel injection that could run on low-quality diesel and be repaired with basic tools. This simplicity wasn't a limitation. It was a deliberate design choice that prioritized function over features, reliability over complexity. This simplicity meant that when things did go wrong, and eventually something always does, fixing it didn't require specialized diagnostic equipment or a computer science degree, just basic mechanical knowledge and a wrench. A farmer in rural Australia, a driver in the Sahara Desert, or a mechanic in a war-torn village could all perform the same repairs using universally available tools. In a world increasingly dominated by proprietary technology, the Hilux remained stubbornly democratic, accessible to anyone with basic mechanical skills. Then there's the chassis, a traditional ladder frame design that provided exceptional strength. While unibody construction was becoming popular for passenger cars, Toyota stuck with this old-school approach for the Hilux, giving it the ability to flex over uneven terrain without breaking. This flexibility wasn't a weakness, but a strength, allowing the truck to absorb stresses that would crack more rigid structure. The frame could twist and flex with the terrain, dispersing forces that would fracture lesser vehicles. The suspension was equally straightforward. Leaf springs in the rear, capable of handling heavy loads while providing the articulation needed for off-road use. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was nearly impossible to break. And when parts did eventually wear out, they could be replaced in the field with basic tools. No computerized alignment machines or specialized equipment required. The springs themselves could even be repaired in primitive conditions, straightened, reinforced, or even replaced with improvised materials if necessary. Perhaps most importantly, Toyota's engineers had created a truck that was fundamentally water-resistant. The electrical system was simple and well-sealed, allowing the vehicle to ford rivers and operate in monsoon conditions that would short-circuit more sophisticated vehicles. Distributors were positioned high in the engine bay, wiring was protected in robust looms, and critical components were sealed against moisture. It wasn't amphibious by design, but its ability to survive brief submersion became legendary, as a Top Gear team would later demonstrate to dramatic effect. The cooling system was another masterpiece of over-engineering. With a large radiator and efficient water pump, the Hilux could operate in extreme temperatures without overheating. From the frozen wastes of the Arctic to the scorching heat of the Sahara. The system had enough reserve capacity that even with partial damage or clogging, it could continue to function, keeping the engine within operating temperature even under extreme stress. But the true genius of the Hilux wasn't just that it was tough, it's that it was designed to be maintained under primitive conditions. Every component could be accessed with basic tools. Parts were interchangeable across years and even different Toyota models. This modular approach meant that one functioning Hilux could donate parts to keep several others running, creating a kind of mechanical immortality. In conflict zones, this became particularly valuable, allowing fighters to maintain operational vehicles by cannibalizing damaged ones, keeping their fleets running long after conventional military vehicles would have been abandoned. The fuel system, too, was designed with real-world conditions in mind. The diesel variants could run on poor quality fuel that would clog the injectors of more sophisticated engines. Simple pre-filters could be cleaned rather than replaced, and in emergencies, the system could be manually primed and bled with nothing more than a wrench and a piece of tubing. This resilience to fuel contamination, a common problem in developing regions, became another key to the truck's global success. Even the body panels were designed with practicality in mind. Simple stamped steel, easy to repair or replace, and attached with accessible bolts rather than hidden clips or complex assemblies. When damage occurred, as it inevitably would in working environments, repairs could be performed quickly and affordably, often with salvaged parts or even hand-beaten panels from local metalworkers. The truck wasn't designed to be pristine. It was designed to keep working regardless of cosmetic damage. In a world increasingly dominated by planned obsolescence, the Hilux was an anomaly, a vehicle actually designed to last decades rather than just past its warranty period. Toyota probably didn't realize they were creating an icon of resilience. They were just building a good truck, following principles of quality and durability that were deeply embedded in the company's post-war philosophy. But in doing so, they created something that would transcend its humble origins to become a symbol of survival against the odds. The Toyota Hilux was designed to help farmers transport crops and construction workers haul materials, but its true destiny would be realized far from the peaceful fields of Japan or the suburbs of America. The transformation from workhorse to war machine wasn't planned, but in retrospect, it seems almost inevitable. The perfect confluence of engineering and circumstance. The transformation began in the 1980s, particularly in Africa and the Middle East, where conventional military vehicles faced significant challenges. Traditional army trucks were expensive, heavy, and required specialized maintenance and parts that simply weren't available in remote regions. Breakdowns were common, and in the harsh environments of desert warfare, a stranded vehicle often meant stranded soldiers, a potentially deadly situation. Meanwhile, Toyota had been quietly building a global reputation for reliability. The African continent, with its punishing terrain and limited infrastructure, had become a proving ground where only the toughest vehicles survived. Land cruisers and Hilux trucks had been conquering these conditions for years, building a reputation among local drivers and mechanics. When conflict erupted, it was only natural that combatants would turn to the vehicles they already knew could survive. The first widespread military use of the Hilux came during the Toyota War. Yes, that's the actual name historians gave to the 1987 conflict between Chad and Libya. Chadian forces, outgunned and outmanned by Libyan troops with Soviet-supplied armor, mounted machine guns and anti-aircraft weapons on the beds of their Toyota Hilux and Land Cruiser trucks. This wasn't a novel tactic. Technicals had been used in desert warfare before, but never with such devastating effectiveness. The results were devastating. The lighter, faster Toyota pickups could run circles around Libya's conventional tanks and armored personnel carriers. They could strike quickly, then disappear into the desert terrain before counterattacks could be organized. The heavily armored Libyan vehicles, designed for conventional European battlefields, found themselves outmaneuvered on the harsh desert terrain. Speed and mobility trumped armor and firepower, a lesson that would be relearned in conflicts around the world. Chad's Toyota mounted forces handed Libya a humiliating defeat, destroying hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles while suffering minimal losses. Military strategists around the world took notice. A new form of highly mobile warfare had emerged, centered around these virtually indestructible Japanese trucks. In 2003, the TV show Top Gear purchased a 1988 diesel Toyota Hilux with 190,000 miles on the odometer, a truck that was already 15 years old and well used. What followed was perhaps the most extreme vehicle durability test ever conducted for television, a multi-episode saga that would cement the Hilux's reputation in popular culture and introduce millions of viewers to the legend of Toyota's unkillable truck. The test began simply enough, driving the truck down a flight of concrete steps, smashing it into a tree, and submerging it in seawater. Most vehicles would have been destined for the scrapyard after any one of these ordeals, but the Hilux kept running. The Top Gear team was impressed, but not satisfied. They were determined to find the breaking point of this seemingly indestructible machine. They crashed it into trees. They dropped a caravan on it. They hit it with a wrecking ball. They submerged it in the ocean for hours during high tide. They dropped it from a crane. They even placed it on top of a 240-foot block of flats that was being demolished. With each successive test, the truck became more battered, more broken, but somehow the engine kept running. The wheels kept turning. What made the tests particularly impressive was the minimal nature of the repairs. Between ordeals, the truck received only basic attention. No replacement parts, no specialized equipment, just enough mechanical first aid to get it running again. This wasn't a carefully stage-managed demonstration with secret rebuilds between takes. It was a genuine test of survival against increasingly absurd odds. After each punishment, with minimal repairs, and importantly, no replacement parts, the Hilux started and drove. The final, burnt, mangled truck now sits in honored display at the World of Top Gear exhibition at the National Motor Museum, a testament to engineering that refused to surrender despite being subjected to abuse far beyond any reasonable expectation. Today's Toyota Hilux is a far cry from its 1980s ancestor. Modern models feature touchscreen infotainment systems, advanced driver assistance features, and complex electronic control units for everything from the engine to the suspension. They're safer, more comfortable, more efficient, and in many ways more capable than their predecessors. But something has been lost in this evolution. The beautiful simplicity that made the 80s models legends of resilience. Has the legend survived? Toyota claims the fundamental principles remain and regularly produces marketing stunts showing the truck surviving conditions that would destroy lesser vehicles. But some purists argue that the simplicity that made the 80s models truly immortal has been sacrificed on the altar of modern convenience. Electronic fuel injection may be more efficient, but it can't be fixed with a screwdriver in the middle of nowhere. Computerized engine management may optimize performance, but it introduces vulnerabilities that the mechanical systems of the past simply didn't have. This tension between advancement and simplicity isn't unique to the Hilux. It's a fundamental challenge in engineering: how to improve performance and features without compromising the essential reliability that users depend on. Modern vehicles are unquestionably better in controlled conditions. They're more powerful, more efficient, safer, and more comfortable, but they've also become more specialized, more dependent on infrastructure, and in many ways, more fragile. There's a profound lesson in the story of the Hilux, one that extends far beyond automotive engineering. In our pursuit of advancement, we sometimes mistake complexity for improvement. The 1980s Hilux reminds us that genuine durability often comes from simplicity, from building something so fundamentally sound that there's simply less that can go wrong. It's a philosophy that applies not just to vehicles, but to technology, institutions, and systems of all kinds. The resilience of the Hilux came not from advanced technology, but from basic engineering principles executed with extraordinary attention to detail. Parts were overbuilt. Systems were designed with generous safety margins. Accessibility and repairability were prioritized over sleek design or manufacturing convenience. These aren't revolutionary concepts. They're engineering fundamentals that have been understood for centuries.